I saw the lipstick first, smudged like a fingerprint on the collar of his white dress shirt. Her lipstick. Eleanor only ever wore that one shade, a deep wine red called October Blood. Said it made her feel like a femme fatale. It made me feel like a footnote. It was barely 20 minutes into the reunion. I was staring at the stain while she clutched him like she was about to drown. My wife, wrapping her arms around another man with the kind of tremble that doesn't come from surprise. It comes from memory. Nobody had even told me who he was. He just appeared like a glitch in the night, tall and soft-spoken, with a face I hated instantly. Not because it was handsome, it was, but because she looked at it like it was the last photograph of home. Then she whispered something into his ear. I couldn't hear it. He nodded, and she collapsed. Not like someone fainting from heat, not like someone overwhelmed. No. Her knees buckled like a puppet whose strings had been cut, her whole body twisting sideways with a terrifying silence. One heel came off. Her wine glass shattered against the marble floor like a firework. And for 2 seconds that stretched into forever, nobody moved, except him. He caught her before she hit the ground, arms sliding beneath her like he'd done it before, like he'd practiced for this, like this wasn't the first time he'd held her body in his hands. That's when I started shaking, not from panic, not even from fear, from recognition, because deep inside my memory, a place I don't like going, I knew this scene. I'd seen it before, not exactly, but close enough. A hug, a collapse, a man who wasn't me catching her like she belonged to him. Only this time, there was a stain on his shirt, and I had no idea what came next. He said her name before I could. Not Eleanor, the name I use. He said Ellie. Soft, like he was afraid it might shatter in the air. Like it wasn't a name, but a spell he didn't want to break. Ellie. Hey, look at me. Ellie. He tapped her cheek, cradling her head like he knew every freckle behind her ear. I was still frozen in place, half a step away, completely invisible. No one even looked at me. I could have screamed, and I don't think a soul in that ballroom would have blinked. Someone yelled to call an ambulance. A few people formed a loose circle around them, murmuring worried guesses. Dehydration, low blood sugar, anxiety. But the man holding her? He wasn't guessing. His expression was something worse than panic. It was guilt. He kept checking her pulse, brushing her hair away from her face like he'd done it 100 times. One of the women, a tall, sharp-looking blonde I didn't recognize, crouched down beside him and whispered, "It's happening again, isn't it?" Again. I finally broke out of my daze and moved closer, forcing my way into the circle. That's when I saw the mark. On Eleanor's wrist, barely visible under the thin silver bracelet I gave her last Christmas, was a faded scar, not fresh, not angry. Old. He touched it like it was sacred, and that's when her eyes opened. Sort of. They weren't her eyes. Not really. Not the ones I wake up next to. They were glassy, unfocused, as if she didn't recognize anyone around her. Not even me. Especially not me. She locked onto his face and mumbled one word. Just one. Still? He nodded, jaw clenched tight. Yeah, still. Still what? Before I could ask, she started shaking. Not a seizure, not violent. More like a slow tremor. A humming through her body like some internal engine was misfiring. Her lips moved, but I couldn't make out the words. He could. He leaned in closer. She whispered again. I saw him go pale. No, he said out loud. I told you I destroyed it. Someone tugged at my sleeve. The blonde. Her voice was low, urgent. She didn't tell you, did she? I stared at her like she'd slapped me. Tell me what? But she didn't answer. She just gave me a pitying look and stepped back as the EMTs rushed in with a stretcher. Everything turned clinical. Fast. Questions. Flashlights in the eyes. Blood pressure. They loaded her up and told me I could ride in the ambulance if I was family. If I was family. I said I was her husband. The paramedic barely glanced at me. Right. You can sit in the front. Front? Jonas, I finally heard someone say his name, was already climbing into the back holding her hand, and she let him. Not me. Him. That ride to the hospital was the longest 40 minutes of my life. I couldn't hear anything up front, couldn't see anything in the back. I just stared at my knees, replaying that moment on loop. The hug, the collapse, the name, the whisper. Still. Still what? When we arrived, I was the last one through the ER doors. By the time I got in, she was already in a private room. The nurse at the desk gave me a strange look when I asked where Eleanor Parker was. "Oh, you must be Caleb," she said carefully. "She mentioned you." Mentioned me. My wife collapsed into another man's arms, whispered cryptic things about something he supposedly destroyed, and in the middle of all that, mentioned me. Like a postscript. That's when I realized I wasn't just in the dark. I was in the middle of something I was never supposed to see. They wouldn't let me into her room. "She needs rest," the nurse said, offering me a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She's sedated. But that guy, Jonas, he's in there." She didn't blink. She asked for him. My jaw clenched. I didn't say anything. I just walked to the nearest chair and sat down, hands shaking, sweat cooling on my neck. 3 feet away, the door to her room was closed. I could see his shadow moving behind the frosted glass. Occasionally, I heard the low hum of his voice, but not hers. And still, she hadn't asked for me. Not once. An hour passed, maybe 2. A doctor came and went, then another nurse. Then finally, Jonas stepped out. He was holding something under his arm, a black folder, thick and worn like it had been opened 1,000 times. He didn't see me at first. When he finally noticed me, he didn't look surprised. He looked tired. "We should talk," he said. I didn't respond. "She's okay. Physically. The episodes aren't... Look, it's hard to explain." "Try," I snapped. He hesitated, glanced down the hall, then back at me. "Not here." He handed me the folder. It was heavier than I expected. "She wanted to destroy it," he said quietly. "I didn't let her. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe you should be the one to read it now." Then he walked away, hands in his pockets, like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in my lap. I waited until he was gone, then opened it. The first page wasn't handwritten. It was a photo. A black and white surveillance photo of Eleanor. Standing in the middle of a parking garage, staring up into a security camera, her expression unreadable, her eyes fully black, not dark, black. I stared at the image longer than I should have. My first instinct was to dismiss it. Bad exposure, a trick of the light, maybe even an edited file. But the longer I looked, the more that illusion fell apart. That wasn't lighting. Her pupils weren't dilated. Her entire eyes, iris, sclera, everything, were pitch black, as if someone had erased the color from her soul. And then I noticed the shape behind her. In the far corner of the grainy image, just beyond the curve of a parked SUV, there was a figure. No face, no details, just a tall, thin blur. But even through the static of the image, I felt it watching. Not her, me. I flipped to the next page. Medical notes. But not recent ones. These were dated 7 years ago, way before I ever met Eleanor. The handwriting was erratic. Some pages looked like a doctor's report, others like journal entries. Some were scratched out violently, as if someone had regretted writing them halfway through. But the same name kept appearing, over and over again. Jonas. He wasn't just someone from her past. He wasn't just an ex. He was her emergency contact for 5 years. Even 2 years after she and I had been dating, I was never listed, not once, not even when she broke her wrist slipping on the ice outside our apartment. She told me she wrote me down that day. She lied. I kept reading. There were descriptions of non-responsive fugue states, auditory hallucinations, and something called the mirror event, a term that showed up repeatedly but was never defined. One line was underlined in red ink 3 times. When she hears the sound, she forgets who she belongs to. I slammed the folder shut. My heart was pounding. I didn't know if I was reading a psychological file or a government one. It felt like both. And worse, it felt like I was the last person on earth to know anything about the woman I married. I stood up, folder still in my hand, and walked straight to the nurse's station. "I want to see my wife," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. The nurse, a different one this time, looked up. Younger, distracted. "You're Caleb?" "Yes." She glanced at her monitor, then back at me. "She's asleep, but you can sit with her. Room 12. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Heavy, artificial, the kind that pressed against your eardrums like water. Eleanor lay still, her hands folded neatly over her stomach, like she was playing dead. Her eyes opened the moment I sat down, not slowly, not groggily, wide open, like she'd been awake the whole time. "Did he give you the folder?" she asked before I could say a word. I nodded. She stared at the ceiling. "Then you know." "No," I said. "I really don't. What the hell is going on? Eleanor? Who is he? What is this folder? What's wrong with your eyes in that photo? And what does 'when she hears the sound' even mean?" She closed her eyes again, and then whispered, "You'll hear it soon enough." Before I could speak again, something sharp pierced the room. Not a scream, not a siren. A frequency. High, thin, like a dog whistle made for machines. I flinched. My eyes watered. But Eleanor didn't move. She just smiled. It stopped the moment I blinked. That thin, high-pitched frequency, so sharp it made my teeth hurt, just vanished, like it had never been there at all. The nurse outside hadn't flinched. No alarms, no one running in, just me, hunched over in the chair beside Eleanor's bed, feeling like I'd just been stabbed in the ear with a tuning fork. She didn't look at me, just kept smiling at the ceiling like she was waiting for something else, or someone. "What was that?" I asked. She didn't answer, but I saw it, her fingers twitching, just barely. Like her body was reacting to something she was trying not to show. "You said I'd hear it. Was that it?" I pressed. This time she turned her head toward me, but her eyes didn't land on mine. They drifted slightly to the left, like she was looking just over my shoulder. "You need to leave the hospital before it gets here," she whispered. "What gets here?" But she only closed her eyes again. Not like she was tired, like she was done. I stood up, shaken, and stepped out into the hallway, trying to breathe. That's when I saw Jonas again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. A man in a charcoal suit stood beside him. Pale skin. Unnaturally still. I couldn't see his eyes behind the tinted glasses, but the moment I looked at him, I felt it in my chest. Like my heart forgot how to beat for half a second. They were speaking quietly. Too quietly. But Jonas saw me. He didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Warning. Or regret. I turned to go back to Eleanor's room, but when I looked through the window in the door, her bed was empty. She was gone. She was gone, and no one cared. I stormed back to the nurse's station, heart racing, voice ready to break, and said, "The woman in room 12, my wife, she's not there anymore." The nurse barely glanced up. "There's no one in room 12. I blinked. "What?" "No, she was just there. Eleanor Parker. Brought in about 3 hours ago. Jonas signed her in. Ask anyone." She typed something lazily into her terminal. "Sir, room 12 hasn't been used all day, and we don't have a patient by that name on file." I leaned over the counter. "That's impossible. I came in the ambulance with her. She collapsed at a reunion. You had her on oxygen. There were vitals on the monitor. I sat next to her for hours." She was already shaking her head. "Sir, we have no record of you arriving here. And no ambulance check-in under that name." "I have the folder," I said, holding it up like it proved anything. "He gave me this. Jonas, the guy who was with her." At that, the nurse finally stopped moving. She stared at the folder, then slowly stood. "You need to come with me." I followed her into a back hallway, away from the main waiting room. She opened a door to a storage closet. Not an office, not a room. Just a windowless space filled with hospital supplies. And said, "Wait in here. I'm not waiting in a goddamn closet." But before I could finish, the door slammed shut behind me. And locked. I stood there in silence, breathing fast, staring at the flickering fluorescent light overhead. The walls felt closer than they should have been. There was a smell. Faint, metallic, like cold air wrapped around old batteries. I tried the knob. Nothing. My phone had no signal. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20. No one came. Then the light flickered hard once, buzzed loud, and died. I was in complete darkness, for maybe 5 seconds. And then, something knocked. Not at the door. From behind the wall. 3 slow knocks, like someone who wasn't in a hurry. Someone who knew I would hear it. My hands were shaking now. I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. Then a whisper, right against the drywall. "She was never yours to find." I jumped back, heart in my throat. I hit the wall behind me, clutching the folder so hard it nearly tore in my hands. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. A file tucked between the pages. Not paper. A photograph. Of me. Sleeping. In my own bed. Dated 2 weeks before I met Eleanor. I don't even own those sheets. That was the first thing I noticed about the photo. The blanket wrapped around me in the image, blue with tiny faded stars, wasn't from our apartment. I'd never seen it before. And yet there I was, fast asleep, one arm dangling off the side of the bed like I'd been knocked unconscious, not resting. The timestamp was clear. June 18th, 2017. 2 weeks before Eleanor and I met. I don't remember anything from that day. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was a weird prank, some kind of psych out by Jonas, or Eleanor, or even the hospital staff for reasons I couldn't imagine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a prank. It felt real, too real. Like that version of me in the photo had been sleeping through something important, something I wasn't supposed to wake up from. When I finally got out of the supply closet, don't ask me how. The lock clicked open on its own. I didn't wait for answers from anyone. I ran. Out of the hospital. Into the cold, empty parking lot where this all started. I stood in the exact spot where Eleanor collapsed, trying to put the puzzle together in my head, but the edges kept shifting. Every memory I had of her now felt borrowed, fragile. Then my phone buzzed. No number, just a text. "You're not supposed to be this close to the original timeline. Stop looking." J. Jonas. But I never gave him my number. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I went home. I needed to see something familiar. My desk, my couch. The water stain on the ceiling I kept meaning to fix. Something that proved I hadn't completely lost grip on reality. But when I opened the door to our apartment, everything had changed. Not just slightly rearranged, completely. Different couch, different pictures on the wall. My desk was gone, replaced with a vanity I'd never seen before. A deep green couch instead of gray. The kitchen smelled like lemon oil, which we never used. And on the coffee table was a book I'd never read. The Miswiring of Memory, How Trauma Rebuilds the Past. Then I heard humming. Soft, familiar. From the bedroom. I crept down the hall and pushed open the door. And there she was. Eleanor. Brushing her hair in the mirror. Smiling. Humming that same haunting melody I'd heard once before. At the reunion, just before she collapsed. But when she saw me, she didn't flinch. She just looked at me through the mirror and said, "You're early." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I stood in the doorway, breath shallow, heart pounding in my ears, staring at the woman in front of me, the woman I married, who looked exactly like Eleanor, and yet, not quite. Her posture was relaxed. Her voice was calm. There was no panic, no shadow of fear in her expression, just quiet recognition. And something else. sadness. She set the brush down gently on the vanity and turned to face me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was hoping you wouldn't wake up until the sequence ended." "What sequence? What is this? Where are we?" She stepped forward slowly. "This is the reset. One we built together, before everything fell apart. You asked me to bury the memory. All of it. The collapse. The facility. Jonas. The experiments. Everything. You didn't want to live in that world anymore. Neither did I." I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were filled with wet cement. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would I agree to that?" "Because you were tired," she said, voice breaking just slightly. "You were tired of losing me, over and over. Every collapse, every glitch. They said they could fix it, but the fix never lasted. Until you came up with the idea, don't fix the timeline. Leave it. Build a new one. And this?" I gestured around the apartment. "This is what? A dream?" She shook her head. "A decision. One we made together. We signed the contract, and they locked the core memory behind a failsafe. Something we agreed you'd never break, unless something inside you refused to forget." That's when I remembered. The blanket in the photo. The knock behind the wall. The black eyes. Not hallucinations. Warnings. Ghost signals. Backdoors from a life I no longer lived. The folder wasn't supposed to exist, but my subconscious had brought it back, piece by piece. And Eleanor, Ellie, had tried to keep me from opening it. "I just wanted us to be happy," she said quietly. I took a step closer. "Are you real?" She laughed softly. "That's the wrong question." I nodded, because I finally got it. This wasn't about what was real. It was about what we chose to make real. Love doesn't live in facts. It lives in feeling. And mine had survived across whatever this was. Time, memory, systems, dreams. I reached out and touched her hand. Warm, solid, alive. "So what now?" I asked. She smiled. "Now, we start over. For real this time. No more resets, no more echoes. Just you and me." I looked around our strange, familiar apartment, and for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt still. Not confused, not afraid. Just home. She leaned in close, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Welcome back, Caleb." And this time I didn't wake up, because I already had.